AITAH for not wanting sex with my husband after he cheated on me. I forgave him, but I can't forget what he did, and now I'm terrified that saying no will destroy our marriage. I never thought I would be asking strangers on the internet whether I am a bad wife because I don't want to have sex with my husband. But here I am. My husband and I have been together for 10 years. We have one child. From the outside, I think people would probably describe us as a normal married couple. We have a home. We have responsibilities. We have family drama. We argue. We make up. We take care of our child. We go to work. We come home. And most importantly, we're still together. But there is one part of our marriage that has been broken for a very long time. And I'm starting to wonder if I am the one who broke it. Or maybe it was broken the moment he cheated. I honestly don't know anymore. Before anyone asks, yes, I love my husband. That's actually what makes this so complicated. If I didn't love him, this would probably be much easier. I could just leave. I could pack my things, take my child, and walk away. But I don't want that. At least, I don't think I do. I still want him coming home every night. I still feel calmer when he's around. There are moments when I'm sitting beside him and everything feels peaceful. Sometimes we're watching television together. Sometimes we're eating dinner. Sometimes we're just talking about completely ordinary things. And in those moments, I think, this is my family. This is where I belong. And then another part of my brain reminds me, you thought that before, and he still cheated. That's the problem. I don't think I ever completely recovered from it. We have been together for 10 years, but the version of our relationship before his affair feels like another lifetime. I used to trust him. Completely. I used to make plans years into the future without even thinking about it. I would imagine us growing old together. I would think about our child growing up. I would imagine family vacations. A bigger house. Retirement. Grandchildren. All those stupid little things people imagine when they think they're going to spend the rest of their life with someone. I don't do that anymore. Not because I don't want to. Because I'm afraid to. I learned that the future I imagine can disappear overnight. 3 years ago, my husband cheated on me. I won't get into every detail because honestly, even thinking about it makes me angry. What hurts the most isn't just that he was with someone else. It's the explanation he gave me afterward. He told me that part of the reason it happened was because I wasn't sexually available enough. He has a much higher sex drive than I do. Mine changed dramatically after having our child. Before becoming a mother, things were different. I had a completely different relationship with my body, my emotions, my energy, and intimacy. After giving birth, something changed. My desire just wasn't there anymore. It wasn't that I hated my husband. It wasn't that I wanted someone else. I wasn't secretly attracted to another man. I simply didn't feel that need very often. And my husband did. So I started saying no. Sometimes several times. He would ask. I would say no. He would try again another day. I would say no again. Sometimes I would tell him I was tired. Sometimes I would say the child was awake. Sometimes I genuinely wasn't in the mood. And sometimes I didn't even know how to explain it. I just didn't want to. That's when the distance between us started growing. And then he cheated. When I found out, I felt like someone had ripped the floor out from underneath me. I remember thinking, so this is what happens when I say no. Was I not enough? Was my body not enough? Was our family not enough? And then he told me that my lack of interest in sex had contributed to it. He didn't say it was entirely my fault. He insisted that the decision was still his. But he also made it clear that he felt neglected. And that somehow made everything worse. Because now I couldn't just be angry. I started questioning myself. Maybe I had been a terrible wife. Maybe I had ignored his needs. Maybe I had pushed him away. Maybe if I had tried harder, he wouldn't have looked somewhere else. Those thoughts stayed in my head for months. Eventually, I realized something. Even if our marriage had problems, even if I rejected him too often, even if he felt lonely, he still made the decision to cheat. Nobody forced him. He could have talked to me. He could have suggested counseling. He could have told me he was unhappy. He could have asked me to work on our relationship. He could have left. Instead, he cheated. But knowing that didn't magically make the pain disappear. And I stayed. That's probably the part people will judge me for. I took him back. There were complications with both of our families. There were arguments. There were screaming matches. There were nights when I couldn't sleep because my mind wouldn't stop replaying everything. There were days when I hated him. There were days when I hated myself for staying. There were days when I looked at our child and thought, I can't destroy this family. And there were days when I looked at my husband and thought, how could you do this to me? Eventually, I forgave him. At least, that's what I told him. But forgiving someone doesn't mean forgetting what happened. I haven't forgotten. Not even close. In fact, I think the affair changed something inside me. I don't trust happiness the way I used to. Whenever things are going well, part of me becomes nervous. If we're having a good week, I tell myself not to get too comfortable. If we're laughing together, I remind myself that everything can change. If he tells me he loves me, I appreciate hearing it. But somewhere in the back of my mind is the thought, You believed him before. I have become a person who constantly watches for signs. Is he acting differently? Is he hiding his phone? Is he staying late? Why did he suddenly change his schedule? Who is texting him? Why did he take longer than usual to respond? Sometimes nothing is wrong. Sometimes he's literally just living his life. But my brain doesn't know how to relax anymore. And I hate that. I hate feeling like I'm waiting for the next disaster. I hate that I can't completely surrender myself emotionally to my own marriage. And that brings me back to sex. My husband still has a high sex drive. Mine hasn't really returned. There are rare times when I genuinely want him. Sometimes I initiate, but it's rare, maybe once a month, sometimes once every 2 months. And even then, I sometimes wonder if it's just hormones or circumstances. Most of the time, I don't feel the desire. And I know he's frustrated. I can see it. He doesn't pressure me like he used to. He knows that pushing me will lead to an argument. So now he usually backs off when I say no. But I can still feel the frustration. And sometimes that makes me feel guilty. There are moments when he gets close to me and I know what he wants. And I'm not comfortable. I don't want it. But instead of saying no, sometimes I just let it happen because I don't want another argument. I don't want him feeling rejected. I don't want to hear about how lonely he is. I don't want another conversation about how we aren't intimate enough. So sometimes I just think, fine, and I go along with it. But afterward, I don't feel closer to him. I feel empty, and that's when I started asking myself a question I never thought I'd have to ask. Am I supposed to do this? Am I supposed to give my husband sex because I'm his wife? Is that part of my responsibility? Is saying no repeatedly selfish? Am I being unfair because his sex drive is higher than mine? Or am I allowed to have boundaries even inside a marriage? I honestly don't know anymore. There are people in my life who would say marriage means compromise. And I understand that. Marriage absolutely requires compromise. You compromise about money, where you live, how you raise your child, family events, housework, schedules, holidays, 1,000 little things. But can you compromise on something you don't want happening to your own body? That's where I get confused. Because if I say no, I'm afraid I'm failing him. If I say yes when I don't want to, I feel like I'm failing myself. And I'm caught somewhere in the middle. My husband has told me that he doesn't expect me to be available every time he wants intimacy. He says he understands that I have a lower drive, but at the same time, he has told me that he feels unwanted. And I understand that too. I don't want him to feel unwanted. I love him, but love and desire aren't always the same thing. I can love someone deeply and still not want physical intimacy. At least that's how I feel. And I wonder if that's normal. The biggest problem is that the cheating changed the meaning of intimacy for me. Before, being close to him felt safe. Now, sometimes it feels like I'm exposing myself to someone who already proved that he can hurt me. It's difficult to explain. He wants me to trust him again. And I do trust him more than I did immediately after the affair. But not completely. How could I? Trust isn't a light switch. You can't turn it off one day and turn it back on 3 years later. It's more like a glass. Once it's broken, you can put the pieces back together. But you can still see the cracks. And sometimes I think my lack of desire is connected to those cracks. Because how can I completely relax with someone when part of me is still waiting for him to hurt me again? Sometimes I imagine what would happen if he cheated again. And that's another reason I don't let myself become too attached to our future. I tell myself, don't get too comfortable. Don't depend on him too much. Don't make him your entire world. Because I know now that people can change their minds. People can make terrible choices. People can promise forever and then destroy everything. I know my husband says he won't do it again. And maybe he won't. Maybe he genuinely regrets it. Maybe he learned his lesson. But I don't know what will happen 10 years from now. And that's terrifying. Recently, we had an argument about intimacy. It started over something small. He asked me if I wanted to be close. I said no. He didn't push. He just became quiet. Eventually, he said, "Do you even want me anymore?" That question broke my heart. Because I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to say yes. Because I do want him. Just not always in the way he wants me. I told him, "I love you." And he said, "That's not what I asked." I didn't know what to say. Because the honest answer was complicated. Sometimes I do want him. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I look at him and remember why I fell in love with him. Other times, I look at him and remember the betrayal. Sometimes I feel safe. Sometimes I feel like I'm waiting for the next betrayal. And sometimes I feel guilty because I know he isn't responsible for everything my mind does anymore. But he is responsible for the original wound. That's something I can't ignore. He asked me whether I was punishing him for what happened 3 years ago. I told him I wasn't trying to. He said, "Then why does it feel like I am still paying for it?" I didn't have an answer. Because maybe, in some ways, he is. Not intentionally, not because I'm trying to punish him. But consequences don't always arrive in a neat package. He made a decision 3 years ago. That decision changed our marriage. And even though we stayed together, the consequences stayed too. I can't simply decide that I should be over it because enough time has passed. I wish I could. It would make everything easier. Sometimes I even wish I could become the woman I was before. The woman who could completely trust her husband. The woman who could make plans 10 years into the future. The woman who could hear, "I love you," without wondering whether there was another woman somewhere in his future. But I'm not her anymore. And maybe that's what hurts the most. I don't want to leave. But I don't want to live like this forever either. I don't want to keep saying yes when I mean no. I don't want to keep saying no and feeling guilty afterward. I don't want my husband to feel unwanted. I don't want to feel like an obligation. And I definitely don't want my child growing up thinking this is what marriage looks like. So now I'm wondering if staying together is enough. Maybe it isn't. Maybe we need counseling. Maybe we need to completely rebuild our relationship. Maybe we need to talk about intimacy without treating it like a debt one spouse owes the other. Maybe I need to work through the betrayal. Maybe he needs to understand that his cheating didn't just hurt me at the moment I discovered it. It changed how I see him. It changed how I see myself. It changed how I see our future. And maybe we both need to accept that. Because I don't want revenge. I don't want him miserable. I don't want him begging for affection. I don't want to use sex as punishment. That's not what this is. I just want to be allowed to say, "Not tonight," without feeling like I'm doing something wrong. I want him to understand that my body isn't a marital obligation. And I want to understand that his need for affection doesn't make him a bad person either. We're both human. We both have needs. But we can't solve those needs by hurting each other. That's the part I'm finally starting to understand. So, Reddit, am I the asshole? Am I a bad wife because I don't want sex as often as my husband does? Am I selfish for turning him down? Am I wrong for still being affected by his cheating 3 years later? Should I be trying harder to become intimate with him even when I don't feel like it? Or is it okay for me to have this boundary? Because honestly, I'm scared. I'm scared that if I keep saying no, he'll eventually decide I'm not enough again. But I'm also scared that if I keep saying yes when I don't want to, I'll slowly disappear inside my own marriage. And maybe that's the real question I should be asking. Not whether I'm a good wife. Not whether he's a good husband. But whether the two of us can actually rebuild something that was broken. Because I don't want to spend the next 10 years pretending everything is fine. I want to feel safe with my husband again. I want to trust him. I want to want him. I want to look at our future without immediately imagining the day it all falls apart. And most importantly, I want to be able to say no without being afraid of what that no might cost me. Because if our marriage can only survive when I ignore my own boundaries, then maybe we aren't actually saving our marriage. Maybe we're just delaying the moment when it finally breaks. And that's the part one can't stop thinking about.